Okay. Welcome to the Let's Talk Destiny Talk Show. And today I am absolutely beyond giddy to have my guest today. She has been a friend of mine through social media for many years, but this is the first time that we've actually been able to see each other, even
Yeah.
though it's not in person, but we can still see each other. And I'm so excited to have her with us today. As you know, we've been, this month I have set aside to honor fatherhood. And it also dawned on me that while we're talking about fatherhood this month, that not every person who is a father has lived their life with their children that would warrant them being honored or celebrated. And this also has an impact on their children, their sons and their daughters. And so I wanted to talk about that as well. The young lady that I have with me today, who's known as Shamora, she's a wonderful author. She has her own talk show. So I'm kind of intimidated to have her with me
Nah.
today. I'm just kidding. But more than that, she has proven to be a friend to me. So good morning, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. So happy to be here.
Good. I'm glad to have you. The reason I thought about you joining me today is because I remember back when my father died. And this is a perfect example of the power of words and how sometimes you can say something uh, and you say it and then you move on and you don't have any idea the impact that it has on a person that you spoke those words to. But I remember back when my father first died, which has been 10 years now, and I was posting some things on social media about our relationship, things that I missed, things that he did for me, that made me feel special as a little girl or whatever. And one day you commented on one of my posts and you said, you don't know how blessed you are to have had that relationship with your father all of your life because everybody didn't have that. And honestly, until you said that, back when I was a little girl, I knew that some of my friends' fathers didn't live with them, but I just didn't think about it because all I know was that mom and dad were there. That was our household. They were just there. That's all I knew all of my life. And then when you said that to me, for whatever reason, that day it really hit me more than any time that there are actually little girls who did not grow up with their father telling them how special they were. They didn't grow up being able to run and jump on daddy's lap whenever they wanted to. They didn't grow up whenever they cried and had a little boo boo. They couldn't run to their daddy and have them pick them up and call them a princess or whatever. And that has stuck with me these last few years. Every time I see you on social media, almost that comment comes back to my mind. And so when I think last year it was that your father passed, and I watched from a distance as you dealt with that. And I have questions in my mind as to how you would be feeling um, having to deal with that situation with this man who was not there for you. So, throughout, because I know when my father died, I was devastated. Like, I just felt like the world, I had no foundation. I felt like the world was like falling off its axis. Like, how can the world still exist without my daddy being here? But that's because of the relationship I have with him. So I really want to understand how you feel uh, when the man who is your father has not been in your life like that, and what you feel when they're gone. Now, let me ask you this question first. Was your father ever a part of your day-to-day existence?
Okay. And I just want to let you know that, at no point do I want people to think of this as a bashing. It's not going to be that. This conversation, any of my conversations are always just for an understanding,
Yes,
because everyone's human and
that's right.
decisions are personal. We make them We don't know how they affect other people, because most times they come from a selfish place. And so later you see the fallout. So
Yes.
a lot of the things I'm going to share are in hopes that just a father somewhere will contemplate the macrocosm of the bigger picture, and not the small picture. So please don't take this as like a bashing. So just to talk about some of the formative times, my dad was in my life when I was a child. My parents were married. In our home, there were a lot of there was a lot of dysfunction. He had a habit, various different things that he partook in that would affect his behaviors in the home. There was definitely domestic violence in my home. So these are the things that I encountered as I grew up. But then he had this other side where he was loving and entertaining. And so, when you're younger, part of your coping mechanism is you hold on to those times when daddy was funny or daddy told this joke or, and so that was my dad for me at that time. As I grew up and became older and needs were different and, the scope of your thinking changes.
Yes.
I realized that some of those things that I really need, he wasn't providing. We struggled financially. My mom worked really hard. And sometimes she was the only one that was taking care of home, and he was working every day supposedly. And like, so why are we struggling? Why are the lights cut off today? And why is my mom, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's like she's the only one responsible in the house. And then that's when things became even more strained in their relationship. And so by the time I got to high school, they divorced. At some point in my high school career, they divorced. And I'm the youngest of three. It was a blended family. My two older siblings had a different dad. They shared a father, and then my mom married my dad and had me. So, and in that, things kind of affected us differently because, they had this space where they could say, well, that's not my dad acting like that, or that was not my dad that did this thing, but it was mine. And unfortunately, I held on to some of that guilt when things happened in the house because I was like, well, it's my dad. I'm sorry, my dad's acting that way, just it was an added layer of responsibility I took on because I love my siblings and I hated that we were going through that. And I hated that they were going through that. And when my parents finally divorced and my dad decided, hey, we lived in Texas. My dad decided, hey, I'm going to go and move to California. And he left. He never paid child support. Mom struggled a lot. She was trying to get me through high school, assist her two older children that were embarking on college. And it was a strain for her. And I saw that my mom and I are pretty close, and I wore that, with her, never wanting to ask for anything, going without just because I knew money was tight. And, my mom is just amazing. She talks to me. Like when I was a kid, she talked to me. She made sense of things to us. She never hid things that she knew we could overtly see. So by the time he actually left, I knew, I understood everything. It wasn't, and then it was an information age for me as well. There was a lot of talk shows and things that just kind of promoted self-awareness, knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, knowing that you have hangups, and just kind of self-therapy. And so I practiced some of those things, I wrote a lot. I had a couple of friends that I could confide in. So I was doing self-therapy to be aware that I knew what was going on. And I had to be aware because, statistically things happen, and I was in line with some of those statistics. My first serious boyfriend was almost my dad, had a lot of similarities, up until the point where he became a little physical. And then at that point, I was like, yeah, I realized, I recognize what this is, and I'm not doing this. So, as I got to that part in your life where you start to kind of grow into your adulthood, making decisions where I'm going to college, these kind of things, I realized that I had to cut some losses so that I didn't step into a cycle. Right, and and at that time, my dad was coming back to Texas because, I mean, he's him wherever he goes, so you're not going to escape to California and be some different man. Your vices go with you. And so he ended up back in Texas. And, I was different. I was a little bit more mature, a little bit more self-efficient. But unfortunately, I feel like wherever you suffer the most trauma, that's where you're stuck at. And being that little girl longing for her daddy's love, I felt I was stuck there whenever I dealt with him. Whenever he would call, whenever he come by, I return to this. I regress back to this. I needed my daddy, and I needed his approval, and I needed his love. And he kept showing me, like, I'm not going to be that, princess father that you're looking for. Yeah, I'm not, every time I subjected myself. So I see how that cycle is. I see how battered women can just kind of sit and stay in the space because they love a person and they want them to do better. And they have these aspirations that, okay, this is the last time, yes. Because that was me, which, and I know that this is a reflection of the household that I grew up in. Yes. But I would, my last few years of high school, where I'm trying to have, these junior and senior moments, and he's supposed to come through for this or come through for that. And I still waiting for those things. And then the moment of, I'm supposed to leave at 8:00 and at 7:59, he says, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it. Almost killing those milestone memories, yes. for me, yes. But then I had this other circle that wasn't going to let that happen. And, but emotionally it completely happened, for me, that because I'm looking for my dad to do that. And yeah, I have this other person or these other people on this other side that'll be like, hey, we got you, don't worry about it. But the damage is done.
Absolutely.
The moment is secured.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the sense of guilt and responsibility for whatever your father was doing or was not doing. Everyone in the house was being affected by it. And so you kind of feel like, I'm sorry, it's kind of like you want to make excuses for, I'm sorry y'all having to go through this, whatever. And I think sometimes I've talked with fathers who have not been in their children's lives for whatever reason, and they finally start coming around to realizing, the void that they created. And you can't fill it once, like you can't replace all those years that you missed. So you have to pick up from where you are. But first you have to be honest and admit that your behavior, your choices, your decisions created that void. And I'm talking with some fathers now who are trying to re-enter their daughters' lives, once they're adults, and they don't want to be bothered with them, and they can't understand why. It's like, we're all human, we all mess up. I don't know why she's acting like that. Well, I do, because as a daughter, I just think back to all of the things that my father did for me that I didn't even have to ask for.
Right.
And in hindsight, I realized I just took those things for granted because that's just the way that I lived. But when I talk to young women who say, my father didn't go to Fields Day with me. My father didn't teach me how to ride a bicycle. My father, and it breaks my heart. Like, oh my God, you missed out on so many great things.
Right.
Even with being brought up in the church, and my father was really strict in, the whole real churchy thing. But even with that, I knew I could count on him no matter what. As I started getting older, wanted to start dating or whatever, he was still very protective. When I got pregnant, you know, I was the pastor's daughter and I wasn't married. So you can imagine all kind of turmoil that caused.
Right.
And I was expecting my father as a preacher to say, really disappointed, you know, I taught you better, stuff like that. But instead, he did exactly what my dad would do. He said, you're not the first person, you're not the last person. Just, you know, be healthy, make sure you have a healthy baby, and we're going to do whatever we can to help you. That's the response I should have anticipated from my father. But I know there are a lot of young women who don't get that. And I also question, I wanted to ask you, do you think that your father's vacancy, even when he was physically there, he was not emotionally providing you what you needed? Do you think this has had any impact on your relationships with men as you got older?
It absolutely had an impact on my relationship. My relationships. Let me say, on both ends of the spectrum. And like I said, in my first serious relationship, the guy was much like my dad. You know, I dodged a bullet. You know, as I started to awaken to what I was actually entering, but towards the end of my high school career and the beginning of my college years, I met a guy who stood in the gap. You know, he stood in the gap without being asked. Like he just did it. Like your dad didn't give you this, here, you can have this. You know, I mean, just money, time, emotional support. Like he was everything. Like everything I wasn't used to seeing in, you know, my dad. Now, let me also say, coupled with that, I always had a good idea of what a man was supposed to be. My grandfather was my first love. He is amazing, was amazing. You know, he loved me so hard that I knew what I wasn't getting as a kid from my own dad. So, and this is my mom's dad. And so, and then my mom's brother, my uncle, I mean, these men always were there enough for me to always have a male role model and the idea of what the ideal man was. So I had that working, as well as I had this possibility of jumping into the cycle and continuing this type of, so I had those things kind of, you know, fighting inside myself. And then when this particular young man took interest in me, and then he just offered me something that, you know, I wasn't being given. And I was like, wow. And this is somebody that says, I love you. And then they show you, you know, and so that was really important to me. So, so I did use that experience and know that these are the things that I missed from my own father. And here is this, I mean, young guy, you know, it's compared to my dad, you know, my dad being an adult and this guy being a budding adult, you know, going into his adulthood and knowing that, well, if you love somebody, this is what you offer them and this is how you treat them. And it just stuck out to me. So I was like, yeah, okay, I don't have to be in that type of relationship. And then, you know, along with all of that awareness stuff that was going on at that time, you had the Oprah shows and, you know, had all these different shows that was like, hey, let's talk about you and yourself and growing out of cycles. And so definitely having the experience with my dad definitely affected my choice in men. I tried that one that was like him, and I realized really quickly, like, that is not what I want in a life. And then I found somebody who was the complete opposite, and I appreciated that. So yeah,
that's powerful. That's powerful, because a lot of us, like you said, we get stuck at a certain place of trauma, and we don't get past that because we use that as our point of everything that goes on in my life from now on. I keep reflecting back to that point. And so that's why I can't really move past it, because I'm dragging that trauma with me everywhere I go. And one of the things that I enjoy about watching you and interacting with you and listening to you talk is how you have you healed from that particular level of trauma. So as we go through life, there's always something else that's going to happen. But you didn't let that particular situation, that void, that vacancy, that hurt, that pain, that guilt, all of that, you didn't let that stop you where you are. And you can tell young women who have got stuck at the point of trauma, because they talk about it all the time. And everything they do, every relationship, they compare it to that. And when they're talking to other young women who are healed and moved past their trauma, they can't really accept that you can heal. And they're always telling you, well, just wait, something else is going to happen. And I like, oh boy. But but I am so glad, I'm so proud of you. And I watched you even now last year, I think it was, when your father became ill. Mm-hmm. Okay, how did you find out that he was ill?
All right, so if I had to break our story into chunks, my early years would be The Damage, maybe be the title, The Damage. But then after I graduate college up till possibly 5 years ago, that chapter would be called, or that section would be called The Audacity. Because during that time where I'm trying to start my career and start my family and try to build myself up, little things that my dad irresponsibly or just haphazardly did that would come back and affect me. You know, here I am, not really seeing him very often, but then go to buy my first home and they say, oh, wait, you have a repo on your credit. And I'm like, I've never had a car. I've never bought a car. What do you mean? It's, you know, stuff like that just kind of creeps up, you know. Just trying, because, you know, again, I'm slowly coming out of the trauma period. So I'm still trying to have some kind of a relationship. And he, you know, he'll call me every now and then. He's like, hey, you know, can I borrow some money? You know, this is a man that, you know, didn't do those things for me, you know, but I don't want you to get put out of your apartment. How much is your rent? And I'm just starting my life too. I have a child, you know, I'm at home, you know, I'm like, well, let me see what I can do. Yes. The man that I was speaking of, you know, he and I in our relationship, and my dad was never really nice to him. But now you're calling me, asking me for money. And if I give you money, it's coming out of our home, our, you know, joint funds. And this is somebody that you haven't been respectful to. So it's, you know, so this whole phase of The Audacity lasts at least, you know, 15 years or so, you know, where when he's up, because, you know, at some point in there, he's way up, like he gets a settlement and he has some money. Well, I don't get any of it, you know. He did give me money to pay off something that he had on my credit. But as far as like, but here for my daughter for all those years, no, that never happened. But that's okay, because that was given to him. That's his journey. Whatever his walk is with that, he has to take that journey. If the Lord had wanted me to have that settlement, it would have come to me. You know what I mean? So I keep going. Well, just years later, he has $0 left of that settlement. And it was a nice settlement. So who does he call? You know, when he can't, so he did, when I was in college, one of the things that he did is he gave me a car. And that's what I say, the things that happened with my relationship was in waves.
The ebbs and tides, ebbs and flows, yeah.
So he gives me this car and I have a car. So fast forward to where I am now, after he has spent all of his settlement and things are going kind of down for him. He's like, hey, can I get that car? I just don't have any transportation. So remember this section is called the audacity. So
yes, Miss Author, I hear you with your titles.
So I, of course, like, I mean, what I'm gonna say, no. I was like, yeah, I guess so, Dad. Yeah, here you go. Well, never saw the car again in my life. Never again in my life. Like, I don't know if he sold the car. I don't know what happened, but I've not ever seen that car again. But that's just, it just makes, this is our relationship. So you've taken one of the last things I can offer you financially. You took the car. I don't know what you did with that. And so for the next few years, like, I will not allow my children to see that. So I never forced them to, like, oh, you got to go see your granddad. And we didn't do that. Because my kids don't, in this part of my life, my kids would never recognize and understand that. They have the most amazing father in the world. He's always there for them. There is never a time that their dad won't be available to them. When you talk, run and jump on his back, run and jump in his lap, him making special trips just for them, that's who they have. They are princesses. So they don't understand. They've never known life like I did. When I think back about them growing up under him, every day for me was an example of what I never had. Every day was an example of, he worked extra hard to provide for them. He wanted them to have something that meant he had to work overtime, and he's working overtime because they're going to get it. I didn't have that. So every day was a day of reckoning for me, to deal with the fact that I gave them the life that I wanted to have. Yeah. But you still have those desires to be that little girl that you're watching love their dad. So as I kind of moved through those years and had some of those hard conversations with my girls, because they didn't understand why, they got a vibe. Like, we don't ever talk to your dad. Why don't we go over your dad's house? Why don't, so we had to talk about those relationships compared to their dad's father, their grandfather on the other side, who they saw, he kept them, because I didn't want to do daycare until a certain age. So he kept them every day. Like, what they understand as a man. They don't understand why they're not getting that same opportunity with my dad, Yes. So we go years where we only see my dad maybe once or twice a year, maybe at the Christmas thing or the, Thanksgiving thing. And it's just for a little while. And he does what he does best on those occasions. He's very entertaining. Anybody that's ever seen him at a Christmas thing or Thanksgiving thing as family, they'd like, oh, he's going to be so funny, because he does. He should have been a comedian. He's definitely hilarious. And so my girls are like, but he's so fun. And I'm like, yeah, he sure is. So, that's the extent of it. And then, throughout those times, I'm always only called when he needs something. That's it. Like, I am money or a ride, or, he never took on the dad role, even as I'm in my 20s and 30s. He never took on the dad role and say, hey, did you guys need something from me? He never got that. So fast forward to, I don't know, maybe about, I don't even know, it could have been about 10 years ago, maybe. He had a little hiccup, I guess, with medically. So he calls me and he's like, hey, I have a surgery, can you take me? So now he wants the doting daughter. Yes. I'm like, whatever. So I'm his only child. He's not married, no significant other.
I missed that part. You're the only child?
I'm his only child, yes. So I go with him or whatever. It's a cancer scare, but they don't tell me a lot. And he doesn't tell me anything. I just know, like, I'm in when they're doing his intake information or whatever. And they get to the point where they're like, have you ever used any drugs or blah, blah, blah? And he's like, no. And I'm like, really, guys, this what? And I had to stop and because look, you asked me to come, but let's not lie. So I look at him and I'm like, never, Dad, really? This is what you're gonna tell them? So, that makes him feel away.
Yeah.
Because he's always been functioning. He's always been a functioning addict, and he never thought I knew. He thought he kept that hidden. So in that moment, that was a reality check for him.
Yes.
He comes out of surgery. He's good. And then he gets better from there. So he goes back to his own place, living alone. I go back to my own life, seeing him maybe once a year for a few more years. And then I get a call one day and he's like, I need this. My rent needs to be paid, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know why. I can't tell you why for the life of me. I said, look, I'm not going to be able to give you the money. I'm not going to be able to pay your rent. You can come stay with me. Don't ask me why.
Oh, wow.
I have no idea why I did that. I think God said, you need this reality check. I need to go ahead and confirm some things for you because I'm still, again, in that trauma space. I'm 10, 12, 13 when I deal with him.
Yeah.
And so I question stuff. Well, maybe he's not using. He says he's not using. So I let him come into my house with my children, my family. And I'm telling you, the man is looking at me like, you did what? This is the same man that would shake my hand? Yeah. Okay. But I needed that time to see some things.
I was going to say there was a need in your soul that needed to be met. And I believe that God predestined that time just for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So he moved in. Of course, it didn't last long because there are some things that my muscle memory, I know exactly what comes next. So I started seeing behaviors that kind of signal, hey, he's a user. Well, you're not going to have those things in my house with my children. Right. So the last straw for that time period was he, of course, somewhere doing a binge, so he doesn't come home for like days and never said anything. So I'm like, okay. So I know where he is. He's somewhere binging. Yeah. But then he lied on me to his family, and he's like, oh, they put me out because they were going out of town and they told me I couldn't stay in their house while they were gone. And I was like, I never left town, but that was so he could get one of his siblings to come pay the bill. And I'm like, wow, so you just do this and you affect all these relationships because they're thinking something of me because they think I put him out and just left. And I was like, wow, this I can't, so all right, Dad, that's not working. You can't stay with me. So then we move forward. He's still living on his own. I get a call one day, probably about 3 years ago. And he says, I need you to help me find somewhere to stay. And I need you to help me find somewhere to stay close to you. That took me back because he's never wanted to be close to me because he can't hide his stuff, So my head said something's different here.
Yeah.
And so, I was like, okay, Dad, I'll, tell me what I'm working with. What are we doing? It's like, because, I'm not paying for anything. He's like, no, I know. Here's what I get every month, blah, 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 blah. So I find him a place closer to me. It's probably about 10 minutes away from where I live. And I start to notice, like, his struggles. Like, he had started going to a church that actually assist a lot of homeless people and drug users. So that kind of spoke to me a little bit. But he was active in the church. He was a volunteer. He did the kitchen because they used to feed the homeless once a day. Well, the part of town that it was in was away from where I live. So for him to go, he can't go. I can't take you every day. So him trying to find ways to get there and transportation. And I started noticing like he was having a lot of breathing difficulties. And then I was like, okay, so something is going on. He tells me, okay, so I'm diagnosed with COPD. Oh, okay, that's fine. COPD. Okay, so we know what works. Okay, so maybe you need to cut your time down. Don't go so often. I'm just trying to be the concerned daughter because
Right.
something in my spirit is telling me like I need to
Yeah.
focus in on this time. So um, we go with COPD. He's in and out of the hospital a lot with the breathing problems, and so I'm like, wow, lady says one particular time because he went often, so often I'm like, let me go check on dad. He's at the hospital again, you know. And usually it's like, oh, it's just COPD. He's okay. He just needed some breathing treatments, you know. So I wouldn't always go if I knew he would be home like the next day and just check on him and call him and stuff. But this one particular time I went, and one of the nurses was talking to me and she was just saying, well, you know, this is stage 4. And I was thinking, COPD has stages. So I'm doing my own research and it does have stages. And I was like, okay, stage 4 COPD. So what does that entail? You know, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. Fast forward to 2 years ago. So we proceed in life. Like he just has a serious case of COPD. So you need to start being a little bit more cautious of how many activities you participate in. You need to stay at home sometimes. Because that's something that he never wanted to do. He never liked to just be still. And I would go over to his apartment every now and then, not as often as self-care for me was to deal with my dad when I could. And I never felt guilty for that. If he called, if it was a moment where I'm like, I cannot, I don't have enough deposits to answer this phone, I would not answer it. Let him call, leave a message. I checked the message to make sure it wasn't something urgent. And then when I had the wherewithal, then I would call and check them out. So it was the end of the school year for me, wrapping up the end of the year things. Hadn't talked to him in maybe 2 weeks. We had text. Somebody taught him how to text. So we had text, but we hadn't spoken. My last day of school, I said, let me go over here and check on my dad. My mom said, I'll ride with you. Now, if you ever want to talk about moms, honey, my mom is the MVP. Awesome. Awesome. But she loved me so much. She was like, I'll go with you. So I was like, okay. So we go over there because he wasn't answering the phone. So we went over there and I let myself in because he didn't answer the door, which was unusual. If I knock, he answered. So I let myself in and I found him sitting on his bed and he could not get up.
Oh, wow.
The house had a real strong smell of urine and he couldn't talk. He couldn't complete a sentence. And I remember one of the last times that we had gone to see him in the hospital, the lady said that he had diabetes, but he said he didn't. And my dad was a small frame guy. So I guess he thought because he's thin, he doesn't have diabetes. Yeah. But it runs in the family. So you might have it, sir. But yeah. So in my head, I'm thinking maybe he hasn't been eating right or something. Maybe he's kind of going into one of those diabetic spaces, sugar too low or something. So I thought, let me get him some orange juice. Because he's just not being able to verbalize anything. Yeah. My mom says, hey, I'll go get some. I'll be right back. So she runs to the store. She brings some back, give him a little bit. He sits there for me, he drinks a little, and then he can kind of talk. He still can't walk. He can't get off the bed. My mom is looking at me and she's like, you're going to have to take him to the hospital. Like, we can't leave this place like this. I'm like, I know. So
let me ask you a question before you go on. When you saw your father in that place, in that condition, did you feel the little girl rise up in you like, oh my goodness, something's wrong with my dad? And I don't want to see my dad like this? Or were you just feeling the adult daughter like, okay, I need to step in and make something happen? Or was there a combination?
I was definitely adult daughter. Um, that because a lot of the last years of his life, I was adult daughter because I tried to mend
Okay.
our relationship, and he was never at a place of acceptance.
Okay.
And him not moving to acceptance was almost a rejection for me. You
Gotcha.
know, we had times where we argued a bit, and we had times where I was like, Dad, I just need you to recognize like things that are frozen in my memory, like the time you did this or this or this. And he was like, I never did that.
Right.
What do
Right.
you mean you never did that? These are things you clearly did. And he was like, I said, so you're calling me a liar? And he's like, you're a liar. So yeah,
I got
I
you.
had to
Yeah.
be adult daughter.
Yeah.
Just I'm one of your last um, resources.
Yeah.
And so let me just do this because
Yeah.
somewhere my blessing's coming.
That's right. That's right. Let me just do this because it's the right thing to do, not
and
because I'm your
yeah.
daughter and I'm taking care of you.
Yeah, because
I,
I also have a nonprofit where I give, and one of the things that just kept playing my head when my dad actually asked to move closer to me was, charity starts at home. I do for so many strangers.
yeah.
I love the fact that I can get out of my community and do, and then here is part of my family, and I'm saying I'm going to deny him that. So I had a lot of come to terms with myself and my beliefs with my dad this journey. And so you're finding him like that, adult daughter kicked in. Girl, I had to give my dad a bath. That was rough. Like
yeah.
to humble myself enough to wash his feet, because by then, it's my mom who I wouldn't dare ask you to do anything like that. This is your divorced, this is your ex, like, and then to know, here I stand as a grown woman, and I know you were abused by him. There were a lot of things that I was like, I could never ask you to because of what I know. And she just was like, I don't look at it that way. You're my daughter, and anything you need, I'm here for it. So
thank you, Mom. Thank you, Mom.
But I got him to the hospital on that occasion, and in talking to the nursing staff, eventually they said, well, he has brain cancer. And I said, what? And they's like, this is stage 4. Comes back to find out this is stage 4 lung cancer that has metastasized to his brain. No. And it had metastasized to his brain. So in that time, that's when a lot of things came to a head for me, because now he was completely relying on me in a way that I never got to completely rely on him. And the question was I ever going to be able to step into those shoes and wear them and do the honorable thing, and so I did to the extent that I feel like, I was supposed to. But the hardest part of this whole entire journey with my dad was to be his voice when he was voiceless, and having not had a relationship with him. I didn't know what he wanted, what I just was not equipped. And that's one of the things that hit me so hard. And I want a lot of men to understand, when you don't have these relationships, men focus a lot on, oh, the baby mama this, the baby mama that. There's going to be a day when you have to rely on that seed you planted. And
say that.
How did you water it? And what is it going to produce for you? And nothing mattered that what my mom thought or said in those moments. What only mattered is what I said, because I was his next of kin, and any decision that came straight to me, and I had to say,
you're his voice.
I had to say whatever it is. And I was like, wow, I had a lot of conversations with my daughters as I went through this journey, because as hard as it was for me to make these decisions, that's because of the relationship I did not have with my dad. They better never, ever tarry when it comes to theirs, because they never went through what I went through. Yeah. And their dad has never shown them anything but love, and they better make their decisions solely based on it. So it was a journey for all of us.
Wow. And then he passed, and I was watching you from a distance and praying for you and praying with you, because I understand that it was different for me when my dad died, because of the relationship I had. It felt like a part of my soul was like taken away, and I had no clue. Like, I knew my dad was sick, but when he went to the hospital that last time, he had been to the hospital for the same thing like 100 times. He had, congestive heart failure. And so they would, take fluid off of him and send him back home. Mm-hmm. So this is what I thought was going to happen. So when they called me at 3:00 in the morning to tell me he's dead, I'm like, you need to check and make sure you have the right person. Like, if it's a different James Green, because my daddy cannot possibly be dead. So the trauma that I felt, the shifting of my world, was totally different than what you experienced. But I listened to you, I watched you, I prayed for you, and I felt a strength inside of you that I don't even think you realized that you had until you needed it. Yeah. And I was so proud of the way you handled that, because I know so many that would have said, he needs to call, whoever it is he's been hanging out with all these years.
I'm telling you, there were days where I was like, I didn't sign up for this, Lord. I mean, I think I have tapped into that daughter supposed to and feel that, and that cup is running over, and I need to be seated now. But exactly. And it was, here's the other part too. Sometimes it was a thankless job, because my dad was very mean towards those last months, and he loved me, and this is the thing that got me through, is because I pay attention to so much. Psychology is one of the things that I love the most. I studied it a little bit when I was in college. It was mandatory for my pathway, but then life happens, and then you see examples of life around you, and so some of those things I kind of layer. And one of the things that helped me to move through this was to try to analyze my dad and why. My dad didn't have the best father, so he would not have been able to pick up what that looks like, because he didn't have the best role model himself. And then there was the stint. My dad went to prison before I was born. My dad went to prison. He spent some time in prison. And in that environment, my dad was a small frame guy, but he talked like he was 6'3". So I'm sure he engaged in some things. And then he spent some time in solitary. Well, if you know about the Kalief Browder story, that definitely affects their mental. So my dad probably, these are just me assuming things that help me sleep at night. Yes. Some of his addiction was probably self-medication for those things that he suffered as he, was in there. So what happens to you, over a period of time, you can only maintain self-medicating for so long before you become this addict. And then you start to have all of these behaviors that go along with addiction. So it's just, I think it was a spiral for my dad. It was a spiral starting from one place to another. Some of the things that my mom tells me is about how responsible he was trying to be as a young teen, who was assisting his mom, who had left his dad. And so he was the older brother trying to make sure mom's good and the family's good. And so that's how he had some of his run-ins. And what actually got him locked up wasn't necessarily something that he did, but it was something that he was willing to take the hit for in order to save who he thought he was saving. So, it's just, there's so many things that ended him to where he was. Yeah, I can blame him because he had the power to control his life. But then we're living in a society where we know that these environmental influences are geared to take Black men off of that path anyway.
Absolutely.
So all of those layers helped me at the end to just push through and if nothing else, try to afford him some dignity in his last days as much as possible. And when I couldn't be that, I didn't go around him, because I knew that these were his last days. Yes. I didn't know how many, but it's like, if I can't go and be like, hey Dad, how you doing? I'm not gonna go today, because I watched him die. You know what I'm saying? Like, I watched the demise, the decline of him from being able to take care of himself to not. Yeah. And he's always been a man, so I know that him being dependent and that also, that also was a layer for him. And so he's dealing with all of that stuff too, and not with the best mental capacity. So some of these behaviors are results of that. So I tried to take all of that so that I could, like I said, afford him that dignity and death, that I just tried to not make it worse than it was already going to be for him. Because at the end of the day, he's my dad, I get to look just like him, it's one of those things where it's like, I have a constant reminder that is who he was. And I have a friend who has a relationship with her dad, very much like the one that I had with mine. Her dad, he's well or whatever, but he has his own issues. And her thing is, he doesn't exist. And I said, that's definitely self-care. But at some point, you'll be faced with it again. I said, but the thing that humbled me enough to do what I did is to wonder how it would feel to know that you're about to die and there are things that you did not get to correct. And do you want to ever leave this earth knowing that the one thing that God gave you, your daughter, and she won't even talk to you, and if I could change just that one thing before he died, I felt like I was obligated to do so.
Well, I just want to say I'm extremely proud of you. As I said, I have watched you. I don't even know how long we've been friends on social media, but I'm very proud of you. It's been a long time and what you have accomplished. And before we leave today, I want you to just share with the audience some of the things that you have accomplished. Tell us a little bit about your nonprofit.
So I have a nonprofit. It's Beyond Enough, and it focuses on young women, just to offer them the opportunities to believe in themselves. So we try to give them things, task opportunities where they strengthen their core of who they are and find the pride within themselves so that they can then accomplish things that they see in their futures. It was definitely born of conversations that I had a lot of times being in education. Young women would come to me with so many different problems and so many different parts of the spectrum, simple to like super complex. And I was like, wow, if you're telling me these things and you're not talking to your mom, or what if I wasn't here and you tried to talk to another 12-year-old about this, this is not something I want you doing. So it definitely is like a mentorship, but we try to provide opportunities where we start the conversation, but hopefully moms and dads finish the conversations, so we often include parents in our events so that they can find out those moments and like, I didn't know you thought that, or I didn't know this was happening. And then hopefully giving them tools to have conversations and offer them different resources to then further their therapy or whatever it is they need.
All right. That's wonderful. Now, tell us a little bit about the books that you have written.
So with those books, you're going to get a lot of things. I write for young adults. I write books that are centered on some of the things that they experience, bullying in the way that they experience it, because unfortunately, they don't experience bullying the same way we did 10, 15, 20 years ago. And then just experiences that they have that they often don't talk about. One of my favorite pieces is about teen dating violence, because I noticed where young men or young women would be really aggressive with their little boyfriends, little girlfriends. I'm thinking, okay, y'all just boyfriend and girlfriend, you know, why would you put up with someone treating you this way? So definitely wanted to bring that into a conversation. You know, with young adult books, you can throw in some sermon-y stuff, some preachy stuff.
I love that.
So I would do that. And then on the adult side, romance, erotica sometimes. And my current piece that I'm kind of procrastinating getting it done, but we're doing a murder mystery. So.
Oh, wow. I love murder mystery. I love anything. I watch crime movies, crime. Yes. My son, the one that's incarcerated, he's like, I don't understand why you always, whenever I call you, 90% of the time you're watching some crime documentary and movie or something. I've always been fascinated and intrigued by it. And that's just who it is. Okay, as we close out, I want you to tell us a little bit about your two most precious gifts, those beautiful daughters of yours. They both have graduated, right?
Yes, yay. Oh man, and they are breaking my pockets. Let me tell you about these two. Let me tell you what great parenting can do. And I'm gonna go ahead and pat myself on the back. Great parenting.
Go ahead.
Great parenting. Because mom and dad has been all about them for their entire lives, and investing in them and pushing them. And you know, we have a pretty set of standard. You know, we set some standards. You know, it's not like do whatever you want to. And then we hold them accountable, and we hold ourselves accountable, and they get to see that, and it definitely affects them moving forward. And these two young women are the epitome of my life's work. Everything that I wanted to heal from, they are the product of, and I'm not gonna cry. But all of the trauma and hurt that I experienced, they are the healing of that. They are what that would be without it. And the oldest pushed through. She has graduated college, has her bachelor's, preparing for going back for her master's.
Awesome.
And the youngest just finished high school. She will have her associate's degree as well, and is gearing up to start her bachelor's work. So
awesome.
We have honors. We have National Honor Society. We have Chancellor's List. I'm proud. You
should be. You've done a great job. And I'm extremely happy to share your story, because it's a perfect example that even with the void of fathers or not having the ideal relationships with fathers, that your life doesn't have to be over, and your life doesn't have to end there, and you can have a very successful life. And I definitely wanted to share that part of your story, because you have written some fantastic books. You've raised some beautiful young women, and they're honorable and very respectful. And I'm just very proud of what you have accomplished. And I want
thank you
to know that if, for whatever reason, we don't talk again, I want you to know that I'm extremely proud of what you've gone through and how you've healed from this trauma and allowed it to push you and not hold you back. Okay?
Yes. And if there's one thing that I could just make sure that people get from all of this sharing is maybe two things. Living or respecting the therapy or the self therapy or a guided therapy will never, that's not the healing part. The healing part is when you start to reveal that you actually are scarred.
Yes.
And then that's when the healing can start. And however, you have to move through that, preferably with someone who is experienced in that field. But if you do it yourself, there are definitely resources out there. Do that, because you can break a cycle. It is absolutely positively possible to break a cycle. That's one. The second thing is in trying to heal for, sometimes you have to know your client. You have to know my easier days were when I recognized that my dad was human and he was absolutely controlling the part that he could control. Those other parts he could not control. Whatever it was about him, whatever his experiences were, whatever those layers that I don't get to know, he couldn't control those. And so he was operating out of those controls that he did not have. And me being able to control my space and what I was doing allowed me to be able to engage when I needed to and not when I could not. So definitely recognize who that person is when you're looking at those roles. Like, I'm the daughter, he's the dad, but he doesn't have these things and this without this equipment, he's not going to be able to do X. And so operate from there, and that way you'll save yourself a lot of new trauma. Because
absolutely,
they are who they are going to be. They are.
Thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate you, Shamora, for joining me today. I have really been blessed by this, and I've received a lot of insight, and I've come to have a better understanding of some things that I didn't understand before, because it wasn't my experience. And now I've learned a lot from listening to you talk, and I just really appreciate you taking time to talk with us today.
Well, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for seeing all those things you saw. I try to live out loud so that people get to see what they need to see.
Yes. Thank you. I love you, and we will talk again soon.
I love you too. Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.